Hello students of CBSE 2022 board examination for B.ST to be held on 17th of this month. Next chapter which is to be discussed is the financial management. So what is the financial management? Financial management is the management of fund optimally utilized which is acquired from different sources at reasonable cost. तो जो फंड्स हैं ये तो ठीक है कि डिफरेंट सोर्सेज से एक्वायर करना है, बट इट इज़ टू बी वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट टू kept in mind कि it should be at reasonable cost, and at the same time it is to be deployed optimally in the business to maximize the wealth of owners and shareholders. Then the role of financial management and objectives of financial management are also there. First role and objective is the determination of fixed assets, then the determination of current assets, third is the determination of proportion of long-term and short-term finance, and last but not the least is the maximization of the wealth of the owners, that is shareholders. That is the ultimate and main objective and role of financial management. Then the financial decisions comes. उसको हम लोग financial function भी बोलते हैं, and under it the three decisions and functions are covered. First the investment decision, second financing decision, and third dividend decision. Now under the investment decision, the funds which are acquired to be invested in long-term assets and short-term assets. So long-term investment decision and short-term investment decisions are there under the investment decision. That is to be decided. How much the fund is to be invested in long-term assets and what the fund is to be used in short-term assets. Now the factors. अभी next बात आती है what are the factors affecting the investment decisions. Just first factor, obviously cash flow of the project. The cash flow, cash inflow and cash outflow are involved in the execution of the project, long-term project or short-term project. Then the rate of return. The rate of return is calculated on the basis of expected rate of return out of the project and risk attached with it. तो rate of return भी depend करता है कि what are the expected return of the project. Then the third is the investment criteria which involved in the investment decision. That the net present value, one of the criteria, internal rate of return is there, payback period will be there. These are the investment criteria which is to be considered for the investment decision to decide, evaluate the investment decision, which under the different criteria evaluation, whether this criteria is effective or not. There are tools for the investment criteria. Then it comes the financing decision. Under the financing decision, it relates to the determination of how the total funds required by the business will be acquired from various sources at reasonable cost. That is a very important aspect of the financing decision. At the same time, how to deploy the fund in the business optimally to maximize the wealth of the owners. That is the financing decision. Once again, factors is chapter on factors. Every decision is covered for the factors. So next, the factors affecting the financing decision. Yes, cost. Cost of all sources of the finance is different. The rate of interest of debt is different. Fixed rate of dividend or to be paid on preference share capital also different. Higher the cost of the fund, the financial decision will be affected accordingly. The more the less fund will be acquired or decided. Then the risk. Debt capital is the very risky capital, and accordingly it will be affecting the financing decision. Now the fund, whether how much the debt fund is to be used or acquired, that will depend on the risk associated with it. Next, the flotation cost. The fund acquired involves the flotation cost. That issue of shares, issue of debentures, these funds require the higher flotation cost. The company will have to decide whether to undergo equity shares or debentures to acquire this mode of fund. Other mode of fund could be the bank finance or institutional finance. So in that situation, flotation cost being the lower. So therefore the decisions will be affected through the flotation cost also. Then the cash flow position. Cash flow position of the company also depends in deciding the financing decision. If the debt is used, the servicing to the debt will be required through the cash flow position. If the higher cash flow position is there, it will be easier to use the debt capital in the total financial decision of the company. Then the control consideration. What are the control consideration of the shareholders of the company? Whether they are ready to dilute their control if the equity shares are issued, or they are not ready to dilute their control. In that situation, the debt capital or debt funds will be used in the financing decision. Then the state of the capital market. Now in the bullish time or boom period, it is easy to issue the shares and debentures in the financial decision. But if the boom period is not there, it is slack period or depression time is there. In that situation, the other sources of finance will be the favorable, that is the bank finance and institutional finance. So these are the factors affecting the financing decision. Next, the dividend decision. What the dividend decision? It refers what a dividend decision. Under it, the management has to decide what proportion of the profit is to be distributed as dividend and what proportion is to be used in the business for the future growth and expansion. That is the dividend decision. यहाँ पर बिजनेस को डिसाइड करना है कि प्रेजेंट नीड को फुलफिल करना कि फ्यूचर नीड को एक्सपेंड करना, ग्रोथ को ध्यान में रखते हुए कि so that the owners will be getting more dividends in future if the funds are utilized for the further expansion and growth. That is the dividend decision. What proportion of the profit to be distributed as dividend and what proportion of the profit which is to be utilized in the business for the growth and expansion. That is the dividend decision. Next, the factors affecting the dividend decision also there. Once again, amount of earning. Yes, amount of earning will decide how much dividend is to be distributed. Then the stability of earning also there. Every other company has to pay the dividend to please shareholders. So stability of earning also should be there. Stability of dividends. Once again, the company has the history of paying the dividend every year. So in order to equalize the stability of dividends, the company has to think in that way, in that direction. Then the growth opportunity, the more growth opportunities are there, less dividend is to be paid and more profit will be used in the business for future growth prospect. Then obviously cash flow position. Yes, cash will be required to pay the dividend. If the dividend are to be paid, then the cash flow position are to be very good. Then the shareholders' preference. What are their preference? What they like. If they like to get the dividend more and more, okay, no problem. If they like to get the profit to be invested in the business for the future growth, that the shareholder preference also will decide the payment of dividend. Next, the taxation policy. If the tax rate on dividend is higher, it will be better to declare less dividend. अगर टैक्स रेट, क्योंकि टैक्स रेट हाई होने पर dividend is not a tax deductible expense. Therefore, higher tax rate lesser will be the declaration of dividend. Better to invest the profit in the business for the future growth and higher dividend in future. Then the stock market reaction. Yes, higher dividend paying company getting their price increase in the stock market. That is what that if the declare rate is higher. So also, if the stock market reacting very sharply, but the higher dividend will inflate the or increase the price of the that company's share in the capital market more and more. Then the legal constraints also there. Dividend policy of a company also confined with the limits provided by the law. Sometimes the legal provisions say dividend are to be paid only out of profits and after providing depreciation. Without providing depreciation, dividend cannot be paid. That is the very legal constraint and legal limitation on the payment of decision, and accordingly the dividend decisions are affected. Then the contractual constraints also there. When a company receives a huge loan, then the lender can impose a condition on the borrowing company. You cannot pay the dividend for such period. They just want to get their interest on the loan which is forwarded to the borrowing company. Therefore, the lender impose the condition, that is the contractual constraints also play important role in dividend decision. These are all about the three financial functions or financial decisions and factors accordingly. Next, the financial planning. And what is the financial planning? It comes under the financial planning implies forecasting financial needs of the organization and their suitable sources and to ensure their efficient utilization in the business. So that is the forecast under the financial planning for the future. What the requirement of fund will be in future, how the funds will be acquired from suitable sources at reasonable cost, and then their efficient and optimum utilization in the business. That is the financial planning. Now what are the process of financial planning is there. Determination of financial objectives, determination of financial policies, determination of financial procedures. These are the three steps in the process of financial planning. Next, the objectives of financial planning is to ensure timely availability of funds whenever required and to see that fund does not raise the resources unnecessarily. ऐसा नहीं है कि now the under the financial planning it is to be kept in mind if funds which is to be acquired, it should be used in the business optimally. It should not be like that कि funds को ठीक है acquire कर लो देखा जाएगा. So that is not the efficient and effective financial planning. Now the importance of financial planning is as follows. It helps to face the crisis and eventualities. Just to face, how to face in the coming future, how to face the crisis which might come in future or eventualities coming in future. It just helps to face or to handle those situations. It helps in avoiding business shocks and surprises. Also financial planning, अचानक जो बिजनेस शॉक्स आता है, अचानक सरप्राइजेज आता है, जैसे कोरोना टाइम में अचानक जो बिजनेस शॉक्स आ गए या डिप्रेशन आ गया, रिसेशन आ गया, तो हाउ द फंड्स इज टू बी acquired and what the funds are to be acquired, which are decided under the financial planning. Helps in coordination of various business activities, helping in avoiding wastage of finance. That is a very important aspect of the financial planning. Helping in avoiding wastage of finance. So already we discussed in the objectives that unnecessarily funds are not to be acquired. which is not going to be used optimally in the business. Help in creating a link between investment and financing decision. This one is a very, very important aspect of the financial planning. There is always tussle between the finance manager and investment manager. So it just helps to creating the link and create the coordination between the investment and financing decision. And then the last but not the least, the financial control. Now it is to be seen financial planning is done in such a way so that the actual acquisition of fund can be related with the funds which are planned earlier. That is a financial control also. Financial planning supports the financial controlling of the funds which are utilized in the business. Next, the capital structure decision. What is the capital structure? The mix of the capital, the mix of the funds in the total capital of the company. Mix of the owner's fund and debt fund is the capital structure. Now under the capital structure we have to say what are the factors affecting the capital structure decision. That is to be important one. Once again, factors जिसमें फाइनेंशियल मैनेजमेंट चैप्टर में फैक्टर्स आपको डील करना है in all decisions. The capital structure. But the first is the cash flow portion. Obviously, when the debt and equity funds, mix of debt and equity funds are to be used, then the dividend are to be paid, interest on debt is to be paid, cash flow position अगर अच्छा होगा तो capital structure also will be good one. We can use this structure to maximize the wealth of the owners. Higher the interest coverage ratio, make the interest coverage ratio. Higher the interest coverage ratio and good one for the capital structure in which the debt capital is used. Higher debt service coverage ratio also affecting. तो अगर debt service coverage ratio higher होगा तो it is better to use debt fund in the total capital structure of the business. Then the return on investment, with the return greater the return on investment of company, which is increase the capacity to utilize more debt capital in the total capital of the business to service the debt. The capacity of the company also depends on the cost of the debt. If the rate of interest on debt capital is raised, less, more debt capital can be utilized. Obviously, अगर rate of interest कम है debt में, तो more debt capital can be utilized in the total capital of the business. Tax rate. If the income tax rates is higher, the cost of debt decreases. It is favorable to use the debt capital in the total capital of the business. Higher the income tax rate. Now if the cost of equity capital is higher, so it is better to use the debt capital in the business and less the equity capital to be used. ठीक है, अगर एक्सपेक्टेशन अगर हाई होगा तो बेटर टू यूज द डेब्ट कैपिटल. अगर एक्सपेक्टेशन ज़्यादा होगा तो कॉस्ट ऑफ द इक्विटी कैपिटल आल्सो विल बी हायर. In that situation, more debt capital is to be used. Then the flotation cost. Flotation cost also affects the debt capital and equity capital. Once again, if the cost associated with the issue of the shares and debentures are higher, the company has to undergo accordingly the proportion of the debt or equity capital. जिनका cost ज़्यादा होगा, that will be less used. Flotation cost affecting. Then the flexibility. If the capital structure is designed, it should be fairly flexible. That is the amount of the debt capital in the total capital structure can be increased or decreased. That is, there the enough flexibility should be there. And this is how the capital section is affected. Then the control. Now the control of the shareholders. If the more debt capital is used, that is the control of the shareholders will be more and more. If the more equity shares are used, the control of shareholders will be diluted. That depends upon the expectation and need of the shareholders and what they preference, what they prefer, the control aspect of the shareholders. Then regulatory framework also there. For the banking company, more and more equity share capital is to be used in the total capital of the business under the regulatory framework. And some for the specific industry, the debt equity ratio is prescribed under regulatory framework. It is that much under the ratio the debt and equity is to be used. Stock market conditions also affect the capital structure decision. If the boom period is there, then the more and more equity capital can be used. If the boom is the slack period is there, the more debt capital is advisable. And the capital structure of other companies also affect the capital structure decisions of the company. Next topic under this chapter, the fixed and working capital. Now, what is the fixed capital? The capital which is used to acquire the fixed assets or creation of the fixed assets is called the fixed capital, and working capital is the capital which is used into day-to-day operation of the business. That is the fixed and working capital. Once again, factors, इसमें भी factors हैं, factors affecting the requirement of the fixed capital. So for the nature of business, yes, for the manufacturing business, more fixed capital obviously, more machines will be required, and it will take more time. The raw materials will be used, and the finished goods will be coming out of the process. It will take the longer period, so that the more fixed capital will be required. For the trading business, less machine will be used, the less fixed capital will be required. Then the scale of operation, large scale operation will require the more fixed capital, small scale operation will require the less fixed capital. Choice of technique, yes, automatic machines and modern techniques which are to be used, in that situation the more fixed capital will be required. If the technology upgradation is there, more fixed capital obviously will be required. Growth prospects, if the growth prospect is higher, more fixed capital will be required through the use of the modern techniques and technology. If the business is going for a diversification, once again more fixed capital will be required in the creation of the fixed assets, through which the diversification can be. Diversification को बोलते हैं कि when the company is diversifying the different product set due to market conditions is such that the present product is not creating enough demand, the company is just shifting the other product. In that situation, the new machines are to be acquired and more fixed capital will be required. Then the level of collaboration also will be required. If the higher collaboration is there, the less fixed capital will be required. If the lower collaboration is there, and more fixed capital will be required. That is a collaboration with the partnership. That is what the collaboration. Next, the factors affecting the working capital. Yes, once again, nature of business, manufacturing business के लिए more working capital, क्योंकि इसमें जो working capital is locked for the longer period of time. That is from the purchase of raw material can convert and time taken to convert the raw material into finished goods. And for the trading business, less working capital will be required. Scale of operation, obviously large scale operation will require more working capital. Small scale operations require less working capital. Business cycle, yes, under the boom period, more working capital. Demand ज़्यादा more होंगे तो more working capital will be required. For the slack or depressed and the recession time, the less working capital will be required. In the seasonal factors, में seasonal goods are there, sugar cane production and sugar production, or the summer garments and winter garments will require the seasonal product, and under it the seasonal factors affecting the working capital accordingly. Production cycle, the operating cycle. What is the production cycle? The time taken from the conversion purchase of raw material to the conversion of raw material into the finished product. So longer the production cycle, more working capital will be required, क्योंकि वो जो working capital is locked, जब तक वो रिलीज नहीं होंगे तब तक क्योंकि प्रोडक्शन को तो अगर डिमांड हमारा है तो दैट इज टू बी कंटिन्यू, एंड इन दैट सिचुएशन मोर वर्किंग कैपिटल विल बी रिक्वायर्ड. देन द क्रेडिट पीरियड अलाउड, मोर क्रेडिट पीरियड अलाउड टू द डेटर्स, मोर वर्किंग कैपिटल विल बी रिक्वायर्ड. फिर लंबे पीरियड तक लॉक हो जाएंगे हमारे वर्किंग कैपिटल, तो मोर एंड मोर वर्किंग कैपिटल रिक्वायर्ड. क्रेडिट पीरियड अवेल फ्रॉम द क्रेडिटर्स, अगर हमें क्रेडिट पीरियड मिल रहा है क्रेडिटर्स से तो इट इज़ फेवरेबल कंडीशन फॉर द बिजनेस एंड कंपनी, तो लेस वर्किंग कैपिटल विल बी रिक्वायर्ड, क्योंकि रॉ मटेरियल्स हमको उधार में मिल रहे हैं तो हम वी कैन रिक्वायर लेस वर्किंग कैपिटल. इफ द ऑपरेटिंग एफिशिएंसी इज वेरी गुड, लेस वर्किंग कैपिटल. इफ द ऑपरेटिंग एफिशिएंसी नॉट गुड वन, मोर एंड मोर वर्किंग कैपिटल. ग्रोथ प्रॉस्पेक्ट अगर है अच्छा है तो मोर वर्किंग कैपिटल, ग्रोथ प्रॉस्पेक्ट नहीं है तो लेस वर्किंग कैपिटल. लेवल ऑफ कंपटीशन अगर हाई है तो यस, तो रिक्वायर द हायर वर्किंग कैपिटल. अगर कंपटीशन लेस है तो यस कंफर्ट पोजिशन में आप. एंड इन्फ्लेशन, इफ द राइजिंग प्राइसेस ऑल्सो अफेक्ट द लार्जर रिक्वायरमेंट ऑफ वर्किंग कैपिटल. So these are all about the factors in all aspect of this chapter that is to be kept in mind, and the key points are very important under this chapter, and some brief explanation is required when the direct questions are asked or case study questions are required. So this is all about this chapter and the financial management, and the next chapter will be the financial market. Will be discussed in the next video. Thank you. Take care.